So let's talk about why this is actually the best iPhone Apple has made, and why it actually is a difference from previous generations, and not just for the one thing you think is really the popular reason why it's a difference. There's actually a few reasons why this iPhone is actually different and recommended over the iterative changes from the last couple models of the iPhone. Let's get into it. So yes, naturally, USB-C. USB-C is great. I did a short video on just an example of some of the stuff you can do with USB-C on the iPhone 15. This isn't anything new to anything else that can support USB-C, but it is a big world of peripheral and devices that can now work because of this USB-C port. From anything from USB-C drives that can directly output your ProRes video directly to the drive instead of filling up your phone, to USB-C microphones, USB-C lights, USB-C fans. Everything is USB-C now, and Apple finally making that step has made a big difference. But there is something to be aware of with USB-C on the iPhones, and it's actually its speed. Its speed differs based on the iPhone that you got. I am discussing the iPhone Pro Max here mainly, on the iPhone 15 and 15 Plus. Really, I don't personally see that as a big deal breaker, because people that are using the 15 and 15 Plus probably are almost all people that probably don't plug in their phone or use USB-C devices, or especially utilizing the phone for ProRes. But if you are wanting that faster transfer rate, maybe you are transferring large files, unedited, pro-cut, high-resolution pictures, then you are going to want that 10 gigabit transfer rate that you can get on the Pro Max as opposed to the 15 or 15 Plus. Let's run through the rest of the specs on the iPhone, because there are some differences in some of the more standard stuff as well. Pro Max's display is a 6.7 inch display. The display is actually closer to the edges of the screen than previous years. The bezels have actually reduced. It is still a Super Retina. You get that high quality screen where you can play much higher resolution videos as opposed to the 15 or 15 Plus with 460 pixels per inch on this larger screen. You'll also of course get the variable refresh rate on the panel up to 120 Hertz motion, a high contrast ratio, and 1000 nits of brightness. And the brightness is very good, if not one of the best phones out at the moment for direct sunlight. Other things that are big this year is, of course, the Pro models have transcended to getting the newest chipset, which is typically named something Pro. So this year it's the A17 Pro. The 15 and 15 Plus had the A16 Bionic. So faster processor. The only difference I've really noticed it in is video editing and gaming. Of course, your high intensity solutions run phenomenally well on this new processor. But for argument's sake, let's talk about the heating, because that is a thing that people keep complaining about on this device. Well, you know what? Funny thing is, this isn't the only phone this year that has been hotter because of how much processing power these new processors are doing. This is not an uncommon thing in the PC world, especially when you get into very crunched small form factor devices. So I'm not entirely sure why we're so worried about this. I know there was the one device, not saying what its name is, that caught on fire, but that hasn't happened in a lot of years. Manufacturers know how to compensate that. Even if it gets hot to the touch, there's internal settings, and we've seen it where the phone will say it's getting too hot and needs to cool down. These are all safeguards in place now to make sure that phone doesn't have damage to the actual frame. But these processors are pumping out so much power now for data intensive to visual intensive processes to high performing games that honestly can now run as good or even better than a Nintendo Switch, especially with some of the games coming out to the iPhone. I'm not really worried about the heat issues. I don't really honestly have it that often happen, even with gaming on this. So your mileage will of course vary, but it's just something to keep in hindsight when you hear people complaining about the phone getting hot compared to previous models. We just have to realize how much these processors in these phones are doing now compared to even 4 years ago. And of course, lastly, one of the other big things is the cameras. We always get upgraded cameras, but these are really truly, I feel, generational upgrades to the cameras. And a lot of that is just in part with the ProRes capabilities of the phone now for video. But it also has to do with one of the lenses finally getting an upgrade that was way needed. So, primary lens is a 48 megapixel. The wide angle lens is a 12 megapixel. And the telephoto is a 12 megapixel. But the change in the telephoto is it's 5 times optical zoom. Before, and for a long time, iPhones have been stuck at 3x. I know that doesn't seem like a big difference, but in that 3 to 5, it is a pretty considerable difference in what reach you have with the phone before you go into digital. Each of those steps up in optical range before hitting digital is important, and a lot of phones now are hitting that 5x zoom versus 3x. So I'm very happy to see the iPhone Pro Max upgrade to this. I do wish the Pro model had it as well, but this is the Apple way of making sure each level up has extra features that incentivize you to go to that Pro Max model. And then from the optical zoom after that, you also have a step up in digital zoom. Digital zoom goes all the way to 25x. And you also have an outstanding macro camera as well. So Apple is touting these devices really having, I believe, 7 lenses because of the macro and the telephoto and the standard set lenses and the 28 and the 33 millimeter. These are all things that Apple's really touting as the iPhone having so many more vast lenses than before. Now, as far as the primary goes, it's not really changing to a different lens that you can't see. It's still really 3 lenses. It's just that due to the resolution of the main, it's just narrowing in the focus more. And talking about the cameras, one of the other things that I have seen a vast improvement on is night mode. Night mode has been held to 1 or 2 other competitors being, for the most part, better than Apple in recent years. But that gap is definitely narrowed now, and I feel these lenses being substantially bigger, especially the primary, which is getting all that light in, is considerably better now. With these cameras, it is surprising how easy it is now to do astrophotography at night and get those stars and get a pretty good landscape of the sky with the nighttime capabilities of the iPhone. I also feel like the macro is improved a bit. So these are some of the reasons why I feel the iPhone Pro Max is the best option to go with. One of the other main options is still not even really here yet, and that is back to gaming, and that is the ability to get some of the console grade games directly on this guy. If you add a backbone to this device, backbone controller that's USB-C, you have essentially got a Switch in your hands. At a 6.7 inch screen, it's not that much smaller than a Switch, and you have a much beefier processor at this point that can support these new games coming out, like Assassin's Creed Mirage, Resident Evil 4. I just hope developers keep continuing down this road of porting their game from consoles and PC to smartphones now. And lastly, one of the other big changes that needs to be mentioned with the Pro, the action button. I did a short on this as well, but this is a surprising feature as well, is the action button. The slider hasn't been changed in a decade with the iPhones, and it's been a great solution, but I do feel this is a nice move for Apple to making this function or this button more capable. The only complaint I have is the location, because of how wieldy this phone is. It's on the opposite side, that's kind of all the way up here towards the top, making it a little difficult to reach the action button. I still use it quite a bit. I've actually programmed it to camera button. I've switched between this several times to other apps, to even testing out different assistance features and capabilities of it now through shortcuts. But I fell back to using the camera button, as I just wanted a little bit quicker way to access the camera instead than turning on the phone and then holding the button down here to access the camera. And the other benefit that makes is when you set that action button to the camera and it launches just like this, is what's happening now with this button is you can also use it again as a shutter button. So we see this, should be able to see the screen flashing. That's because I'm hitting the action button. So you can even make it into a physical shutter button. So in all, I've discussed a lot here, but this year's iPhone is really, in my opinion, the best iPhone they have made. They've actually changed several things, not just updating the processor only and saying it's the best. They've made improvements to the cameras. They've decreased the bezels, even to a new titanium shell, and the action button, like I said, and just the overall features of the iPhone have definitely taken a substantial jump. Most of the time it is just a processor change, and that's across the board with most phones. Most of the phones, we have iterative designs for the most part anymore. So it's nice to see in these situations where phones will actually take more of a jump instead than just the processor upgrade or adding more RAM. This, I believe, is the iPhone you should get. Obviously, this is the biggest iPhone. It may be too unwieldy for you to hold. I still personally don't like the size of it this much, but because of all its features, for being so future-packed for games, etc., that's why I like this model the best. But I really am looking forward to maybe even the A16 Pro getting all the features that the Pro Max has right now into the 16 Pro, because myself, I like the form factor of the Pro more. So go into a store, check these sizes out if you haven't messed with any iPhones in a while. And the smaller size Pro gets most of the advantages of the Pro models still. The only difference is that 5x zoom, some RAM that may help out in future games, and of course just the overall bigger screen size. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about the iPhones, anything you want me to see me test on the iPhones, accessories, etc. It's a busy month. It's Techtober. There's at least a couple big announcements this month on other phones I'll be covering, so stay tuned for those, and I'll see you in the next video.